This is Mustafa Bosch from Kampala International University. The first video I'm going to talk about is about the hypothesis. So what are the hypothesis types, the testing, like steps for hypothesis testing, and different points we're going to discuss here. So we have four main different types of hypothesis. The first, the first type of hypothesis is a null hypothesis. When we say null hypothesis, that means there is no relationship or difference between the variables. Okay, there is no relationship or difference between. There is no relationship between the variables. Like when we call it H0. Okay, like when we say there is no significant relationship between trauma, exposure, and academic resilience. This is the first type. The second type, we call it the alternative hypothesis. This it's opposite to the null, and here we say that there is a relationship, a relationship between the variables. The null says there is no relationship, but the alternative says there is a relationship between the variables. So we call it H1, H2, and H3, or etc. And if you say H1, there is a significant relationship between trauma exposure and academic resilience. The third type is directional. Directional and non-directional hypotheses are all regarded as alternative hypotheses. But the directional hypothesis here, we specify the direction of the relationship, either positive or negative, as we explained. The positive that the two, the independent and dependent variable, increase together and decrease together, and the negative, like if one decrease, the other increase, and if one increase, the other decrease. Okay, so the direction, we mentioned the direction. That means, like if we say H1, higher trauma exposure will reduce academic resilience. When we talk about non-directional, it is very simple. We don't mention the dimension, whether it is positive or negative. Like we say, there is a significant relationship between trauma, exposure, and academic resilience, but we don't say we don't specify the direction. Okay, either it's going to increase positive or negative direction. Okay, this is the types of hypothesis. The second thing we are going to discuss, like when we talk about the hypothesis, we want to test whether the hypothesis we have is right or wrong. The first step, in order to test a hypothesis, is to state the hypothesis. You have to determine what is the null hypothesis and what is the alternative hypothesis. Isn't that? So this is the first thing you have to determine. You have to state the hypothesis. The second thing is to state the level of significance. When we talk about the level of significance, that's mean the margin of error. What is the acceptable margin of error, or the error that is accepted? That when if the margin of error, finds that the margin of error is larger than the level of significance, that means we are going to reject the null hypothesis. Okay, so here we have to identify the level of significance. The third thing, we have to understand what is the appropriate test we are going to use. Okay, this is depending on the data type and the research design that we are going to talk about in a later video. The fourth thing, we have to compute the test statistic. After you collect the data and you bring the data, you start calculating the different statistics, or use the equations to calculate the level of significance. And when you calculate the level of significance, then you make a decision. If you found, make a decision, if you found that the level of the value that you calculated, okay, is less than or equal to the level of significance, which is usually 0.05. If it is less than or equal, then we're going to reject the null hypothesis, and we say that there is a significant relationship between the two. And if the margin of error, or the level of significance, the value we calculated is higher than the margin of error, then we fail to reject the null hypothesis. Then there is no significant relationship between the two. And the final thing, we are going to draw a conclusion. So we say like we find to the hypothesis, the correct hypothesis, whether there is a significant relationship or there is no